Good evening, everyone. It's Lee the Appraiser for another episode of Amazing Appraising that we're filming live in front of in our brand new gallery here on 57th Street and Broadway. This is where we condense 40 years of appraising experience within a couple minutes. So we have a good friend of mine who just brought in a very beautiful antique style mantle clock. It's approximately about 18 inches high, about in the bottom here probably about 10 inches wide, over here somewhere about 8 inches. A very beautiful clock. It looks like it is engraved on the bottom here. This looks like gold gilt wood, hand painted. It's going to look to me first glance, it looks like it's probably early French. The first thing we notice, like everything else that when you do appraisals, is the brand name, the artist, the designer who made it. So in this case, on the name on the dial is Patek Philippe, Geneva, which is Patek Philippe is known as probably the highest class watchmaker and clockmaker in the world. I think they hold a record of selling a pocket watch for about $12 million a few years back. So, you know, this clock deserves a little closer look, as my friend is looking to sell it, and he is saying that he had an offer of about $75,000, and we're here to see if we can pay more, basically. So we're looking at it closely. The first thing I do is I open it up, and surprisingly, it has what's called a quartz movement. Now this may be somewhat like a solar movement as well, partial solar and partial battery quartz. The condition is quite nice. Now I looked at the clock. Now typically every watchmaker or company will make sure that their name is on the movement. Okay? Now we didn't take this movement out because it's not ours to do so. So it has some numbers on it, but it looks like a standard, we're going to say quartz movement. It may be, I've seen these before a little, and I know that some of them are partly solar charged. So it's an interesting movement, but in no way, shape, or form do we see the name Patek on the movement at this juncture. Now I do know that Patek has made movements like this, and some of them are not signed. So the movement could be theirs. Now we know that Patek and any better watchmaker is very careful to in everything they do. Now, before we turn it around again for the front, we see a name here in the top right corner. It says L. Parmelin, which appears to be French, which I've heard of, which goes with the French design and style. Okay? So, now my friend who brought it here, who's a longtime client, told me he's handling this for a very prominent family, and he trusts that they got it at Patek. He's saying that he believes possibly Patek even cleaned and serviced it a number of years ago. All right, so what I do is when I hear these things, I listen to all of them. I don't discard them right away. I listen to them, and then I see, okay, fine, could be. Which ones make the most sense? I go back and forth in my appraising until I come to a firm decision, and you know, sometimes it's not definitive, but typically it's enough for me to say, okay, I think it's good enough for me to appraise it at X and make him an offer of slightly less. Okay, so we're still doing this here. So initially, when he just showed this to me a little while ago, I believed that the clock was not Patek at all. But after closer thinking and inspection, then I said, you know what? I think maybe Patek made it. Okay, but why would they put a battery movement in there? And then I said, well, you know what? I remember Patek made these type of movements for certain of their modern clocks. Okay, so the biggest two problems I have now is that the design, they made quartz movements typically around the 1970s. So my biggest problem is that it appears the clock itself, the wood, the painting, the metal, everything about it looks like it's much earlier than 1970, number one. So why would even the Patek made the movement and the clock Now, that's a problem here. Why they wouldn't make the clock, because the clock is stamped by another clock maker right over here. So, you know, and Patek is not going to typically make, although they could, made a wooden, you know, a wooden French European clock. That's really, they would make the movements typically and make the entire watch or clock. So that's a little unusual. But their name is right here, blazing. So that's a you know, a little of a dilemma on how to figure that out. So the biggest problem I have here is there's two holes here, which are the screw knobs. They're used typically to wind the clock. So one would be to wind the mechanical movement. The other one typically would be to wind the alarm. Why would they be here on a quartz clock is my biggest question. They both appear to be somewhat plugged up, meaning it's more for decoration than anything else. So what's the explanation here? Why did they do that? Why is Patek on the movement? Why is the name on the back? So I'm going to offer two explanations here. Okay, I think what may have happened is that Patek may have sold this clock, we're going to say in the 1940s, with an original Patek Philippe movement. And then we're going to say that movement probably got damaged or needed repair. So when they went to Patek and say, here, Patek, we have your clock. Could you fix it or clean it for us? And Patek said, you know what? And let's just say this was done in the 1970s or 80s. Patek may have responded, well, listen, we can't get parts anymore for this clock because clocks are typically not made anymore by us. So we therefore don't have these parts or movements in stock. So what we can do is put in a new quartz solar movement. And if we did that, we would also have to plug up the two holes for the winding system. That is my my opinion of what, or presumption of what possibly happened, is that Patek may have sold the clock. It may have got damaged beyond repair from Patek. It may have been brought to them around the 1970s or 80s. They may have serviced it and told them it needs a new movement. We can't give you the mechanical movement here. We'll put in a quartz one and we'll plug in the holes. And that would be my presumption of what possibly happened here. So that happens to be a very hard thing to value because you're valuing basically, it's an original Patek clock with an original Patek movement, but it's not the movement that went with the clock. So that would be my opinion, and I would put down a value here based on that. I'm going to say $10,000 to $15,000. Okay, he said he was offered $75,000. He's a good friend of mine, so I'm going to bless him and tell him take the $75K or anywhere close to that. I just don't see it based on the points that I brought to the public's attention here. So if there's any update on this, we'll keep our audience posted. If you have any questions, if you have anything of value that you want to call or text us about, we have a gallery here on 57th and Broadway, 200 West 57th Street. You can call or text us anytime, any day at 917-439-9610. That's 917-439-9610. We're open 6 days a week, every day but Saturday. Text us pictures, your questions, your comments, and we're happy to evaluate and appraise and repair anything that you have of value: stamps, coins, gold, silver, jewelry, watches, art, antiques, paintings, and especially Patek Philippe clocks. Okay, everyone, take care. Good day.